Hi, Lions. This is Charisse. I just wanted to save us some time at our meeting on Tuesday. I'm really looking forward to meeting with the chapter presidents and other chapter leaders, trying to keep our time together efficient. And I wanted to go over with you some slides that Dr. Allen had arranged to be presented to us by an attorney. Gosh, this was pre-COVID, so it was almost 2 years ago now. We have many different chapter leaders involved and wanted to just take the time to bring those of you who weren't participating in that particular meeting an opportunity to get up to speed. So I'm going to share my slides. They're not my slides, they're actually the slides of Dr. Allen's attorney. Okay, this is Lincoln's attorney, not Dr. Allen's attorney. Okay, so this is was intended to give us a training on what it means to be a nonprofit organization and maintains tax exempt status. I'm not an expert in this, but I thought I could just, I do know a little bit about it because I have practiced nonprofit law in New Jersey in a former life. So I'm going to run through these slides quickly and as it pertains to our situation with the National AALU and the chapters, just as a conversation starter, if we feel we need more discussion or more specific expert legal advice, we can go in that direction. Dr. Allen even noted that she would help us or bring an attorney back if that's what we decide. But for some reasons that pertain to the CIAA coming up, and just because this issue has dragged on for a really long time, we need to move. So I thought I would try to just kind of run through the slides for everyone first. Okay, so the first thing is to note, the attorney noted that nonprofit status and tax exempt status are two different things. You can have an organization that is nonprofit and you can have an organization that is tax exempt. They're not necessarily the same thing, but all tax exempt organizations are nonprofit, but all nonprofits are not tax exempt. Okay, next the attorney went over the different kinds of tax exempt organizations under the IRS code. For our purposes, the only one that's really relevant is the 501c3 because the National AALU is a 501c3 organization. These other kinds are not relevant to our discussion. This next slide gives a little bit more about each kind of tax exempt organization. But again, for our purposes, the AALU is a 501c3 organization, which means we have charitable, educational, religious purposes, and our contributions are tax deductible to the donor. And so that's that. Okay, now we get to some of the good stuff. So how are these organizations formed? Well, you have, when you have a nonprofit organization, it can either be a nonprofit corporation, it can be an unincorporated association, which is not for profit, and it can be a trust. So obviously the trusts are not relevant to us, but in terms of how we operate and how we've been operating, the AALU and its chapters, we could be either one of these. So the nationals is a nonprofit organization. We are a nonprofit corporation. We are organized under the not-for-profit statute of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. But chapters and groups that are sort of affiliated with AALU, they could be operating as unincorporated associations. So it's something that we have to be cognizant about. The difference is that with a nonprofit corporation, you actually file articles of incorporation, you have bylaws, you have a board of trustees. Unincorporated associations do not have formal articles of incorporation. They're not filed with the state. So they're just, they're not formal. Okay, so now we get into the discussion that the lawyers shared with us about how national associations are typically formed. And that's very relevant to us because we are a national organization, the National AALU, which our official name is the General AALU, but essentially we are the National AALU. And we have chapters or affiliated organizations. And so we have not 100% clarified with fidelity what the relationship, what the legal relationship is between the chapters and the nationals. And that's what we need to do. So here is what this slide is about. So this slide is noting that there are multiple ways that national associations can be organized. You can have a single organization that has multiple branches. You can have a central national organization that has affiliated organizations or chapters underneath it. Or you could just have a group of independent organizations that have similar interests but no formal legal affiliation. So this is what it looks like. If you have a single organization with multiple branches, then you would have a national association, such as the National AALU, and then you would have chapters falling, or branches or chapters falling beneath that. The DC MAC chapter, the Coastal Virginia chapter, these would be chapters of the national. So that's what that one option looks like. This other option, which would be a, I'm sorry, now we're still talking, I'm sorry, we're actually still talking about the single organization with multiple branches. The lawyer's giving us some more detail as to what that looks like. So for that kind of setup, we'd have the National Association and we'd have chapters. So the National Association would be the entity with the legal articles of incorporation. We would have bylaws at the national level. The national level would have a board of directors. In our case, our alumni council is in fact our board of directors. The National Association has an EIN number, employee identification number, which is like the business entity's tax ID number. And we file annually with the IRS. That filing, however, should include the information from all, financial information from all the branches. Also, the lawyer said that that national organization is supposed to handle all state registrations. What do the branches have to do, or the chapters? Well, they are established by the national. So when nationals gives a charter, that's us establishing a chapter. The chapters are registered to do business in a particular state or geographic location, but they are not separately incorporated. They may be governed by bylaws. And in our organization, we do have chapters do have bylaws. Now, the lawyer also told us that the chapters would not have separate EINs, and would use the EIN of the national. Now, that's a little different, and that's a legal nuance we'd have to work out, because I know that the way that we operate practically is kind of like this, but I know that we have separate EIN numbers. So we'd need to double check that if we do go ahead and move forward with this form of organization. But the lawyer did advise us that the chapters would not need to have EIN numbers, but would use the nationals. And then she noted that the chapters would regularly report to the nationals. They don't have to do separate IRS filings, and they don't have to do separate registrations, but with the state. Okay, now for the second form of organization. The second form of organization was that central national association with contracted affiliated organizations. And what that essentially means is that, so the National AALU, for example, would be a national 501c3, but we would have our branches or our chapters would also be separately incorporated, separate 501c3 status, but we would be affiliated with one another by recognizing each other in the bylaws, and perhaps contracted means that we would have like an MOU, a memorandum of understanding between us, so that we're separate but we're affiliated. What does this look like? Well, it means that the nationals would be incorporated, but the affiliates or the chapters would also be incorporated. The nationals would have bylaws, the affiliates would have bylaws. The nationals has a board of directors, which in our case is called the Alumni Council. In this case, if a chapter were to be separate, the chapter would also have to have a board of directors or an alumni council. The national EIN number, chapter EIN number. So these are just, basically the chapters would have to replicate everything that the nationals has, and then we would basically come up with a memorandum of understanding about how we would affiliate with one another. Things like the right to participate in national elections, and maybe like using national virtual infrastructure such as Wild Apricot as we mature. Those are things that we could do by agreement, and we would be able to take care of in a memorandum of understanding if we chose this form. And the third option would be a group of completely independent organizations. I'm not even going to talk about this because we're not going to do this, because the national organization, National AALU, we are connected to Lincoln through our bylaws, and our whole elections process, how we elect our alumni trustees, and how that whole process encourages and really requires candidates to be active in local chapters. We are not separate organizations. It's not who we are. So I'm actually going to just skip this one. Now, then I'm going to go on to the last bit of slides, but about how to get the tax exempt status. But before I do, I'm going to back up for a second. So remember, the two options were the National Association with chapters under it, and that's kind of how we're set up now, except for New York has a separate, New York is a separate, is filed separately as like you have separate articles of incorporation and a separate 501c3 status. But mostly, except for the New York chapter, the AALU is set up like this, as a single organization with multiple branches. Our second option, to reiterate, is a central national organization with contracted affiliates. And so to continue with the New York example, not to pick on New York, but you are a little bit different. So to go forward under this model, the National Association would need an MOU with New York so that we could continue to operate as one kind of organization through this affiliate model. The other thing that the lawyer said during that meeting that's not on these slides is we could theoretically end up with a combination of these models. So we could, let's go back to this picture, we could be mostly a national organization with other with chapters, but we could have a few chapters, maybe some large chapters or very established chapters such as Philadelphia or New York or Baltimore. They may decide, and we all may decide, that for those chapters, it would be okay for them to affiliate with us, and we have a strong memorandum of understanding between us. That is an option if we were to choose that. I can already tell you right now, I think that my, I feel like this when I look at, because I did the Constitution and bylaws, and I feel I led that committee in the last administration. I feel like the intent was that the AALU be a single organization with multiple chapters, but it's up for us to decide. So, but we do need to decide. We can't keep letting this drag on. Okay, so this is choice one, this is choice two, and what's not here is we can have some kind of hybrid. Okay, how do you obtain tax exempt status? So the lawyer went on to explain how do you get 501c3 status, and I'm not going to go into this in too much detail. I am going to assure you that the National AALU does in fact have tax exempt status. So it exists. We are a 501c3. When people write checks to us, it is fully tax deductible. However, our tax exempt status presently is not umbrella, meaning it does not apply to the chapters. So, and especially because it's unclear exactly how we're legally structured, we need to clean this up in terms of if we're going to have an umbrella tax exempt status that applies to our chapters, we have a little bit of legal cleanup work to do, and we have to file an extra filing with the IRS. I believe it's Dawn and Rita told me it will be I think like a $2,000 fee. It's not that difficult. We actually are able to do it. They did the research, so they actually really put us in a good place. But we do need to go ahead and do it if that's what we're going to do. If we do that, again, as a reminder, we're operating, at least for those chapters who participate in the umbrella, we're operating as a national organization with branches or chapters underneath it. So that does mean that the financial reporting would need to flow up through nationals, and that would qualify all of the chapters to take advantage of the national 501c3 status. So these are examples of the forms. We already have done this. This is an example of a 501c3 determination letter. We have one of these. This does not apply to us because it's not 501c3. And then the lawyer went on to explain what is required to maintain tax exempt status. These are the things that Rita does to make sure that we are able to maintain our status. Again, if we were to move to that umbrella, it would require that to maintain that umbrella, we would need to go ahead and ensure that those proper financial records that are referred to in this slide, we would need to make sure that that includes a roll up of chapter financials. And these are just a few other slides. This is a slide about some state law matters. I think these are side issues that we can deal with later. I guess to point out is that we are soliciting for charitable contributions. So we do in most states have to actually, technically we're supposed to separately file before we're like asking people to donate money to us or to Lincoln. So we have a little cleanup to do there. We're mostly operating with small potatoes, so it's not like a huge, the compliance issues, the fact that we're out of compliance is not a huge issue, but we do need to get our house in order so that we can be in compliance. Okay. And that is it. So hopefully this was helpful. What we're going to do is when we have our meeting on Tuesday, we are going to start here with the questions. And I will do the best I can to answer any questions. Just so happens that I am an attorney that I practiced some of this kind of work in New Jersey before I stopped practicing law. But we hopefully have enough of a background to have a robust conversation to help lead us in the direction where we want to go. And if we need additional advice, we will get it. So I am really looking forward to seeing you all on Tuesday and going from there, making some decisions, continuing to move the AALU forward so that we can be the best strategic stakeholders to Lincoln that we possibly can be in terms of our alumni body. LU.